architecture program, Universitas Indonesia aims to shape a new generation of architects who are able to design adequately to context. Students must be able to pursue the application of basic theory and architectural knowledge. We ensure that the program is supported with a strong curriculum. Our design studios, as the core of our program, are complemented with compulsory and elective classes. Students should learn the aspects of design from theory, technology, history, and design methods.
Through our programs, we enable the students to learn in different ways. We create different opportunities and different learning environments. Some of them are class-based, such as the studio where the students can do their work and discuss with their peers. Some of them are lab-based, so the students are exposed and trained to do digital or manual craftsmanship. And then we expect them to go directly to the society, so they can go to the field. This usually apply in studio, where they engage with the nature, with different communities, which then expose them to even broader learning environment.
When I joined, I thought architecture is all about tangible aspects, like structures, materials, constructions, and how to build buildings. But in reality, the courses and the subjects are so different. Like we have courses that introduce us to see the intangible aspect of architecture. So it really makes me think that being an architecture student is really more than just learning how to design a building.
Our department is very keen to contribute in research and community engagements. Students from architecture and interior architecture courses are encouraged to apply their knowledge to the community. We also ensure the work is always done with positive dynamics, pitching new ideas, developing the work, and receive feedback whenever we can. We continuously pursue higher understanding of architectural elements through ever-developing research. Not only will this benefit the community that are directly affected by those programs, but it will also help students in their work life after they graduate.
The learning experience was intense, but in a fun way. We refer our knowledge of architecture not only from books or journal, we also learn through movies, art performance, sports. We also do field visit, which is like a construction site visit, public event visit, and many more, which bring us different perspective on how we see architecture.
I think the Universitas Indonesia graduates, they have the skills needed for the profession. I do believe they can feel all the possibilities in this design or construction world. Only few of them can make it to become a real good designer, but that doesn't mean that they cannot develop themselves into other spectrum of profession in construction work.
The students are actively engaged with various activities that is organized by the student unions with the full support from the faculty or the department. One of the example is excursion. The idea of the excursion is the students can learn about architecture from the various places in Indonesia and process of documenting vernacular architecture. So I believe that we can learn a lot from this process, from this excursion, that we live with the people, we talk to them, we observe them, how they live, how they do the activities and their engagement with the space. And at times, we as the students really try to live as the local world.
From this program, I expect to gain many knowledge of architecture, both theoretically and technically. And from that basic solid foundation, I hope I can continue my study into a higher degree and participate in creating Indonesia a better place someday in the future.
All of the programs in Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia will provide graduates with the skills needed for the work life. According to the GS and THE World University Ranking, our program is one of the best in Southeast Asia and ranked #1 in Indonesia. Together, we believe that our staff, along with all facilities, are ready to help students to achieve wonders. The Department of Architecture, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Indonesia is ready to face the world of tomorrow.
Hello, everyone. Warm greetings to all participants joining today. I would like to say good evening to participants from Indonesia. Good morning to participants from New Zealand and United States. And good afternoon to participants joining from United Kingdom. So welcome to the 6th International Joint Workshop and Seminar, or IJWS 2021. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Musab Abdul Syahid from Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia. And I'll be responsible for hosting this final presentation seminar and closing event today. And I'm happy to see all professors, facilitators, students, and public enthusiasts who are now joining us. I would like to say thank you and welcome. The International Joint Workshop and Seminar 2021 is the 6th year joint event as the result of a teamwork of universities as well as multiple stakeholders that has been held in Indonesia since 2016. This year is the first time for the event to be held on virtual format. The program brings together postgraduate students and faculty staff from Universitas Indonesia, University of Florida, United States, Cardiff University, and University of Birmingham, United Kingdom, as well as University of Auckland from New Zealand. By working together under the theme of planning the post-pandemic city, this collaboration allows us for the development of a richer comparative picture on the effects of COVID-19 pandemics on our cities, to optimize the benefits of the different types of knowledge and expertise. The students and supervisors from diverse academic background and nationalities have worked together in groups for 1 month through online platform Zoom. So the aim of this project is to develop several key issues that will enable us a better understanding of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on citizen livelihoods and lifestyles. The data gathered by the students will be used to inform us ideas on the future, more eco-friendly urban development. Today is the final day of the program. So there are 5 groups participating in this seminar, working under 4 main topics, including reimagining new memory in post-pandemic urban homes, environmentally healthy neighborhood, eco-city environment, as well as mobility scenarios for the post-pandemic city. Please be informed for all students groups that each of the group will have maximum about 15 minutes in duration and will be brought only by 2 speakers as group representative respectively to present the study result, which consists of group conclusions and recommendations toward the issues in the topics that are already mentioned prior. If the group's duration have already reached 5 minutes or 1 minute left, the timekeeper will stop you and we can move on to the next group presentation. After all 5 presentations, the supervisors and facilitators from Universitas Indonesia, University of Florida, Cardiff University, University of Birmingham, and University of Auckland will cross-review and give commentary towards the study result to the different group. And also please note for all the audience that we also allow all public audience here to raise their hand in the Zoom to speak and ask the question or comment to the group presentation. So do not hesitate and feel free to express some curiosities in this event. All right, so to save the time, I would like to welcome first group 2 to have the stage, and you may begin sharing your screen. And before, please for all participants and group, please introduce your team members and explain us briefly which topic your group is working together in before starting the presentation. Thank you. And group 2, now you can share your screen. Please, for the group
Thank you.
2.
And Nadira, are you going to share the screen?
Yeah, just a minute.
Sure. Thank you.
Is it showing?
Yes.
Yes, it's showing. You may begin this presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Alex Klein. I'll be presenting today with Mislav. I apologize, friend. I can't say your last name as this moment. I'd like to give a special thanks to Buova, Professor Andrew Flynn, and Pas Nufan. So today's presentation is going to be a quick overview of our team work. We have some general pandemic challenges. This is a brainstorm of our ideas. So the lack of awareness, not wearing masks, panic buying groceries, physical distancing, misinformation. These were all challenges that we brainstormed at the beginning about our healthy neighborhoods. Changes at the neighborhood level. We see some change in transport preferences. We also see lack of community activities. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of our presentation. Sort of the research question that we wanted to answer were if some of the standards around healthy neighborhoods were generalized around the world, and what should a healthy neighborhood look like. So we'll start with our definitions. We'll move on then to our methodology, such as it was, and our content, micro content within the household, macro content context, excuse me, within the full neighborhood and nations, and we'll have a presentation of our outcomes. Next slide, please. So yes, we'll have our definitions here. So these are some definitions of a healthy neighborhood that we brainstormed. So a size went from a few blocks to the whole district. We wanted to have a healthy neighborhood that was trips can be made within 10 or 15 minutes. Lots of green space around if possible, space for leisure and social environment, collective risk awareness, and waste removal, clean air, clean water. These were all things that we found everybody needed for a healthy neighborhood. We also have here purposes for that healthy neighborhood. We wanted to have a neighborhood that would promote sustainable and water and recycling systems. We wanted to emphasize importance of green transport options to help maintain a healthy environment. And we also wanted to support our collective physical health with those green spaces, please. Next slide. So as far as defining health, many of us had some of the same ideas, and same with many nation states. They sort of have the same ideas defining health as a whole. And many of them followed the WHO definition, which is a basic definition of physical and mental health, and the absence of disease. We also had some nations, they hadn't amended their definitions for quite a long time, but when they did amend the definitions, they were adding tangential aspects like social and economically productive lives. And in Australia, they added things like healthy behaviors and safety factors. Next slide, please. And we have here more definitions about the environment within a healthy neighborhood. We had some overlap here in the protection of against diseases, harmless and polluted air and water, health improving facilities and services. These were all things that our nations shared in terms of defining healthy neighborhood. China had some extra specific aspects to this definition. And some things like the spatial forms, slow traffic network, public participation, those were all very quite specific things that China had added into this definition. The key points were that, yeah, China has more specific. Methodology, please. So talking about our methodology, we started with essentially what were interviews and focus group sessions, talking with amongst ourselves, and coupling that with individual observations that we had in our own neighborhoods and local contexts. So we did a comparison of those things and tried to compare them to benchmarks that we found for our nations and the world in general. And we wanted to see if we could further generalize and then narrow down those definitions. And we did that with some data visualization, which helped us bring about or focus in on our conclusions, which are hopes for a post-pandemic environment. Next slide, please. And let's see, is it, I think, time to, or I can keep going. This is your slide, Ms. Love. Thank you so
my
much.
turn. Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. That was awesome. So now we are going to talk about first our micro context, which is defined like on our individual and household context. And pandemic has brought a numerous challenges and changes, with a lot of them happening in our homes. So on this slide, you can see some routines before and after pandemic, but what's the main difference is that activities differed and has changed dramatically. We were more socialized, we were hanging out with friends, and we wasn't aware of some things we have taken a lot of things for granted in terms of our home. And after the pandemic happened, we were extremely paid attention to some changes in activities, to our home and to our routine, diet, health, and physical movement. Next slide, please. It is similar to the family routine. Yeah, we have spent more time with our families during pandemic. Otherwise, during normal times, we were just spending these times in commuting to work, to our university. Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't introduce myself, but I'm aware of time. Yeah, my name is Mislav. Yeah, I'm the second presenter. Sorry for that if you didn't. For my not introducing to yourself. In terms of working hours, it is change which we wouldn't expect, or some people, most of us wouldn't expect that it would happen. In terms of work time, which we have worked or we are working more during pandemic and when we were was in the normal times. And reason for that, it can be that in the normal times we have had strict and organized schedule with our university, with our work, and a lot of people find that really difficult to cope with, and how to organize yourself and your day and your duties and your work in time effective manner. So that was the main difference and main challenge in our work and rest time during and after pandemic. Next slide, please. In terms of rooms which we visited the most, definitely in normal times it was the living room, and activities we were spending time with family in living room, sleeping and working or studying in our bedroom, and that has changed dramatically in pandemic. Not just in terms what rooms we visited the most, and also what activities we have done in these rooms and what we are doing in these rooms. It wasn't the clear separation between activities, between sleeping, between eating, between working, exercising. And yeah, that's kind of related to this work time and management, which most of us have found difficult during pandemic. Next slide, please. And now we are going to talk about macro context. That's the neighborhood context and our immediate surroundings. And when we are talking about environmental healthy neighborhoods, as already Alex has already mentioned our own definitions.
Sorry, the time is 10 more minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. In terms of, as Alex has already mentioned, one of the main features we think what creates environmental healthy neighborhood is accessibility, and how accessible neighborhoods are in terms of these public facilities and services. We have adopted a benchmark from academic literature and governmental publications around the world, but we need to be aware that this has a lot of changes according to where we live, on which continent, in which country, which I would like to talk about later. But how this is related to the 20 minutes neighborhood. It's related with that even before pandemic, city planners said, and a lot of people who were responsible for our city planning, they come up with the concept of 20-minute neighborhood, which might and was a kind of good solution in dealing with numerous problems which city and our neighborhood had and have had. But also, one thing that is important, that it emphasized that its concept of being local and trying to achieve smart, sustainable, compact, and high density city. That last being said, high density is, one may argue that it's not desirable in these high risk times of diseases. Sorry about that. And yeah, how can we manage density when contagious disease risk puts these advantages in our disadvantages? And that's the things that we need to be aware afterwards, and I would like to talk about later on. So next slide, please. On this slide, we've put some average distances from our own experiences from our cities, as you can see on this slide, and they just represent our own data, so you can compare it with some benchmarks with which we have been collected. And next slide, please. In terms of these distances and accessibility, when we determine that, we need to be aware of a lot of things. As I said earlier, a local context, geography, different densities in cities and neighborhoods, and topography, political dimensions, different living arrangements, and also the matter of choice. Some of us are not comfortable spending time in some park which is nearby. They would like to walk more, to be in a place which they find more comfortable. And these public facilities really don't depend on proximity at the same level. So some of these facilities are more important, especially in these COVID times. And especially green spaces, which wasn't so important before pandemic. And that's some of suggestions how we can create in the future a better and healthier and environmental friendly neighborhood, to see that people would like to spend more time in the quality green spaces. Next slide, please.
Okay, one more minute. One more minute.
One more minute. Oh, sorry. This is the pluses and minuses, our positive and negative outcomes from this pandemic. Definitely, we've become more aware of things like health, diet, hygiene, and also we have spent a lot of quality times with our family. On the other hand, we've become less really awfully less physically active, and also we have had limited social context. And next slide, please. How we can turn these negativities into positive things. And yes, next slide, please. No, this one before, please. It's the last two slides. What's
okay, the time is up. The time is up.
Sorry, but we have just two last slides. So
I think you can proceed to the last slide, Ms. Love.
Okay.
what do you have in the final slide?
But this picture is more important, but okay, anyway. Yeah, so what's the future for our neighborhoods? How we can turn these positive things into these negative things into positive ones. So there's the steps we need to achieve, needs to be taken in terms of that we need and who is the responsible. We need city-wide digital transformation. We need to open real-time data. We need to design communities for everyone, not just for some part of the community. And we need to decentralize our systems, because the surge in demand in some crisis on some services caused by COVID has experienced a lot of damage because a lot of it caused several disruption in supplies, for example, in healthcare facilities in Italy. And yeah, we need to decentralize that. We have a lot of centers. Maybe consider that local authorities have authority to do these things in the future. And yeah, I think that's the future, but we shall see what will be a turning point for our environmental healthy neighborhood. That's all. Thank you for your patience and your time.
Thank you so much for the group 2 for presenting the topics on environmentally healthy neighborhood. And now, moving on to the next group, we have group 3 separated into 2 groups, 3A and 3B. Now we can start from group 3A, please. You will also have time 15 minutes and maximum for duration presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, now you can start.
Thank you very much. That was really great. Thank you, healthy environment neighborhoods. I think, yeah, really, really interesting. So we are the first group, Group A for the EcoCity group, and we are Fiska Masuri from the University of Indonesia, and Nathan, Usha, and Prokopis from the University of Birmingham. We have, yeah, so experience from Indonesia and also the UK, Greece, and India, comprising of all the experiences of our participants. So the breakdown of our presentation is firstly our group's research aims, then sort of the key terms of how we want to define what we're looking at, first of all. And we first of all collected data from during pandemic and our own experiences of living through the pandemic. And then we looked at some data from survey data from pre-pandemic, so baseline data collection. And from there, we look at research problems and questions that we wanted to look at further. So yeah, these were really looked at during the pandemic data collection. And then we focused on some different EcoCity models and how this could match up with what people were prepared and willing to implement in their lives. And yeah, matching this up with community assets and appetite for change for a post-pandemic future. Next slide, please. So yeah, first of all, we wanted to investigate how pandemic experiences have changed our attitudes and actions towards the environment and our neighborhoods. Secondly, we wanted to identify these problems faced during the pandemic and how these can be overcome, both based on our personal experiences and from our data set. So, and our final 2 points were kind of matching up the ideals that we had researched, the kind of eco-city ideals that we researched, and how this could realistically be matched up with what people were prepared to do, and yeah, their willingness to change in the future. Next slide, please. So first of all, we wanted to clarify the key terms, because obviously these differ from culture to culture and from person to person. So first of all, an eco-city neighborhood is defined as a human settlement modeled on the self-sustaining, resilient structure and function of natural systems. I wanted to say citizens. But then there's 4 pillars of an eco-city. So these comprise of urban design, biogeophysical elements, socio-cultural and ecological. So yeah, we wanted to focus on the biodiversity, environment, green space, neighborhood, and cluster. Next slide, please. So first of all, biodiversity is an area where we defined ourselves by an area where many different native species of animals can thrive and be supported in an interdependent ecosystem network. Environment is from this definition by Yang in 2006 is the external conditions of an organism or population. The term the environment generally refers to the sum total of conditions, physical and biological, in which organisms live. Next slide. Green space is quite a broad term, which is useful in comparing between different environments. So green space is defined as any vegetated land or water within an urban area, and this can include parks, gardens, green corridors like paths, disused railway lines, rivers and canals, and also derelict and vacant and contaminated land, which has the potential to be transformed. And we will focus on that last point in later on. So neighborhoods are quite a limited definition because they can vary in scale, as the previous group attested to. So these can applied with for the ultra local communities of place and defined by its characteristics. So a shared demographic, a shared demographic and place specific as well. Next slide. So the cluster, which came up especially in the Indonesian context, which I believe comprised of about 500 dwellings in that context. And a residential cluster development is a form of land development in which principal buildings and structures are grouped together on a site, thus saving the remaining land area for common open space conservation, agriculture, recreation, and semi and public uses. Next slide. So we used these definitions to collect data from our own experiences. So these were based on our images of our home and our environment. So we broke this down from private space and neighborhood space. Obviously, we're confined in many instances to where we can go. So these were within a 10, 15 minute, 20 minute walk and cycle away. Next slide, please. So these are a few of the things that came up. So reduced capacity for cafes and places like that. Working from home, of course. Decorating the home, especially came up in the Indonesian context and also in UK context because we're spending so much time in our homes, we want it to look as nice as possible. So in any way we can do that. Next slide, please. So these are the main problems we identified from our experiences. So people are using their cars more. There's less things to do, especially in the UK context. We use the cars to go to retail parks and things like that, and also in an Indian and Indonesian context, and also in UK context, is that there's less public transport, so people are having to rely on their cars more. Stability of cities, supply chains, economic cycles, and people's livelihoods have been affected. People generally generating more waste and lots of litter piled up. And how can we use more natural energy sources when we're so confined to our home and consume more energy at home? So next slide. So these were baseline questions in so the broader demographic characteristics of who we were surveying. So there was quite like 60% between 18 to 24, and more or less a 50-50, more or less split between male and female, and quite aware of their local independent businesses before, and also quite a lot of, as we can expect, many home workers, and also people who live quite close to green spaces. Next slide. So we want to differentiate between homeowners and renters, because so many of people we're surveying are renters, and there's less agency for people to actually implement more eco-city ideals into their lives. So, as we expected, fewer people using renewable energy sources, and also fewer people growing their own food. But there were quite reasonable reasons for this. So lack of space, no time, and they're not really sure of how to do this. So next slide, please. And also, so we wanted to see how renters felt about this, and we found overwhelmingly that they felt that their landlord could do more to make the house more environmentally friendly. So a big one that came up a lot was better insulation and smart meter insulation, and also hydroponic aspects. And the growing food was basically the same as with the owner occupiers, that they don't really have the time, lack of space, and are also in many instances are better to support local businesses. In one instance of the respondent said it's better to support local farmers who perhaps knew more about it. The next slide. Recycling habits, broadly positive, 66.3% did.
Okay, 10 more minutes.
Okay, next slide. So air pollution, we found more that in India and Indonesia, they found more there was more of a reduction in air pollution, perhaps because they were perhaps encountering other problems with air pollution more broadly. So next slide. Next slide. So community involvement, they broadly felt that the communities had come together more during the pandemic, apart from the Indian context where more people didn't really agree nor disagree. So this could say that perhaps there was more of a community cohesion in places like India than in more fragmented European societies. The next slide, please. So yeah, overall, more people were noticing an increase in the amount of energy used for heating and cooling, and which is not a surprise. Next slide. Not really throwing away more food waste. Next slide. Not really a thing that they're starting to grow more of their own food, but some people have always been doing it. The next slide. So I believe Masuri, would you like to take over? Masuri?
Okay. Thank you, Nathan. From the ecocity builder, ecocity means human settlement model of the self-sustaining resilient the structure and function of natural ecosystem. The ecocity provides healthy abundance to inhabitants without consuming more renewable resources than it produces, without producing more waste than it assimilates, and without being toxic to its neighbor ecosystem. inhabitant ecological impact reflect planetary supportive life cycle. Social order reflect fundamental principle of fair, justice, and reasonable. Like in the several key points that we discussed about eco-city idea, like sustainable waste system, community-led initiative, green building, food production, urban farming, and renewable energy in cities. Next slide, please. Like living organism, I think cities and their inhabitants exhibit and require system for movement, transport, respiration process to the option energy, sensibility responding to its environment, grow and changing over time, reproduction and construction need to air, water, soil, food, ingredient, and material. But in one golden rule among sustainable waste management principle that we need to remember that treat waste as a resource. Next, please. The community-led initiative, John Conrad say that community-led development is more than participatory project. It requires a long-term process that empowers citizens and local authorities to transform and transfer.
Okay, one more minute. One more minute.
Okay. Next, this is the community-led implementation in Indonesia, Lombok, that in July, at quick measuring about 64 in Indonesia, and after that, the social community activities were mutually involved in rebuild house that had destroyed.
Masuri, we could go to the conclusion now. I don't think we have time to go through all these.
In the, I think in after that, okay, and the post pandemic, I think. Next, please. Wait, okay, this one. Post pandemic data. We're giving them the question like, are there any preferred recommendation for making activities feel safe that start again, space use, safety measurement, restricted number of people?
Okay, the time is up. The time is up.
But
all right, you can state your conclusion. Otherwise,
what? Go to the next. Yeah, go to the next slide.
Okay, conclusion.
Yeah, these.
Yes, please.
Okay, this one. I think this is the we're trying to make a solution that maybe in Indonesia the concept of shared house is not well recognized. But in family home, usually there is many people living from grandfather, sister, brother-in-law, and something will indicate danger in a pandemic like this, especially youngster. Contract it without symptoms. It like they accidentally spread the virus. It become an issue that in residential planning, a special planning after a pandemic situation. Thus make a close or finding for the way to lock personal design in family house after pandemic, and living cluster will be changed. I have described like that. Here are several points that to highlight, and then the solution is finally, we reach next step from our concern for ideal eco-city that we have studied, discussed, and developed. As you see, the many ideal typical of identity from spatial design, but them coming from longitudinal line, the solution for the new homes retrofitting would be option, just the design and renovation house as well. More using timber and cycle building material, consider long material since activities almost do in home. More efficient to use space, no one probably let the space around house and maximizing left space and preferable activities such as urban farming and education zone. Then public and private space more likely have to highlight around the concept. And the closing is at the end, as human being, we should love about our environment. That might be a baseline, but from love, it can stimulate our desire to maintain and take responsibility how environment and next generation can be. Let's make eco-city as the best we can. We are from a group. Thanks for the attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the group 3A for the interesting discussions and some interesting results from their research. And considering about the time for the remaining three groups, please consider your material presentations to be presented and to suit with the duration of 15 minutes. And later on, during the discussions with the facilitators and question or comments from the public audience, you can also reshare your slides if it is related to the question or to the discussion. So don't worry to give the time for other slides to be presented while it's questions or it's discussed. All right. So please consider your time carefully because we only have 15 minutes for each group. And now, moving on to the next group is the group 3B. Yeah.
Sorry if I just made some comment.
Yeah.
I don't know. It happened to me and happened to this group. You said that we have 10 minutes, and then after 1 or 2 minutes, you just said you have 1 minute. So
I think
just be aware that
yes.
it's confusing. Yeah, I now stopped the time, and I stopped when I was presenting. So somebody of you just said me, okay, you have 10 minutes, and then after a couple of minutes, you just said you have 1 minute. So it's kind of confusing to situate yourself. How much time do you have? Just a comment.
Thank you, Ms. Love, for the correction. Well, I think I would like to clarify that what timekeeper meant by 10 minutes more is 5 minutes left. Yeah, I think he mistranslate the time to English. Yeah, I think that's the case because the timekeeper is supposed to remind you all, the groups, when you only have 5 minutes left and 1 minute left. That's the case, Ms. Love. Hope it is clear for you. Yeah, thank you. And we apologize for the inconvenience. So we can continue to the next group, the group 3B. Later on, the timekeeper can correct the reminder. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Musab. Can you see my file now?
Yes, it's visible. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Start.
Okay, thank you, Musab. Good day, everyone. We all from EcoCities. I'm Rif, and I'm here with Shwan, Dwi, Hafiz, Tiara, Mutiara, and Jessica. Let's begin with our research outline. This covers basically what we've done during these past weeks. So in the step 1 in topic analysis, we define research purpose and then background and also the definition and ecocity. This is followed by data collection and data analysis. And then the next step is problem and needs identification. Finally, the gap between problem and needs is addressed during city adaptation step. So we might agree that COVID-19 has been so painful for all of us, but it also provides tremendous opportunity for urban planners, government, and also researchers to know our cities better. As for our group, we want to use this opportunity first to explore the ways COVID-19 has altered our perception of environment and urban eco-development. Second, to understand change of behavior that happened during the lockdown. And the third is to recommend, hopefully we could recommend strategies on individual or citywide level. And then we try to define ecocity. During the discussion, each students come up with different version of ecocity, but finally we agree on definition that is developed by IEFS. The ecocity is an approach that provides healthy abundance to its inhabitant without consuming more resource than it produces, without producing more waste than it can assimilate, and without being toxic to itself or neighboring ecosystem. Of course, during pandemic, the role of ecocities has been expanded to make our place more resilient to respond to the risk. So the logic behind our study is inside out. We believe that our cities is consist of neighborhood and individual. Therefore, it is essential for us to understand what happened inside our domestic life, to understand what happened outside our domestic life within the city level. This is the first stage of our work. So the purpose, like I have mentioned before, so we try to understand what happened inside our domestic life to hopefully offer solution on how we could build a COVID-proof city. And then for the methods, this is a comparative analysis in 3 time periods: pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID lockdown. This observation is done by 7 students in 3 different countries. As for data collections, we look inward toward our domestic life. We collect daily field diary, schedules. We make personal reflection, and also we capture some pictures. We also analyze changes and the consequence that come with it. The first one is domestic data. I'm gonna explain the result of our first observation. So this picture illustrates a student use of space pre-COVID in 3 different countries. So these colorful dots represent students in Cardiff, University of Indonesia, and also University of Florida. You could see here that before COVID, students move freely within and outside their domestic space. The proportion of space use is almost even. So we spend time 50% inside our domestic space and 50% outside. This proportion changed dramatically after COVID, with students spend more than 90% of their time actually inside their domestic house to do myriad of activities. This implies that the function of our house has been extended not only as dwelling place, but also as a place for working, studying, socializing, and other myriad activities. We also noticed that some activities cannot take place. For example, watching movies in cinema, exercise in the gym, and then also there are activities that is reduced. For example, face-to-face social interaction. There are also activities that is increased. For example, sitting at the front of laptop or our smartphone, and then using social media, and then stockpiling of food. And also there are activities that is new, or we rarely do that before. For example, remote studying and remote working. These changes come with different consequences. It could be detrimental or beneficial. For example, less frequent visit to essential destination has increased emission from vehicular transport. However, increased frequency of online shopping has increased the amount of waste that we produce. We believe that the role of eco-cities design and policy is to lock in positive change and reduce adverse impact of negative change. Now that we have clearer picture of what happened inside our domestic space, we try to expand our horizons to understand what happened outside our cocoon, outside our house. And we draw on mostly from the power of secondary data and internet to collect the information. First one is the trend of air quality. In general, air quality has been improving in the three cities. Among poisonous pollutants, PM2 is arguably one of the most dangerous for its ability to penetrate the deepest part of human lung. And here we can see that in Cardiff, Florida, in Jakarta, the level of PM2 is actually decreasing. The major contributor of this change is the reduction of transport and traffic that happen in our cities. Improvement also happened in urban water, like in Fembanat Lake, we could see like 16% decrease of the amount of SPM, and also lower level of bacteria found from Miami River. However, what happened during the COVID has also have like adverse impact. In this case is water scarcity. We found evidence from Gainesville that potable water use is actually increasing because we tend to do more washing, more cooking, and also more gardening. That requires a significant amount of water. We found evidence that COVID-19 actually has increased the amount of waste generated from our cities, especially food and packaging waste. This is detrimental for city expenditure, as shown by the case of Cardiff city. Here, the city council have to employ 50 extra bin lorries and 150 extra staff to deal with waste issue during the pandemic. Not only for city expenditure, the adverse impact also have effect for the environment. Cardiff is a city that has pledged to be a circular city, but when COVID hit, we have to burn our waste instead of send it to the material reclamation facility. This is also a practice that is not environmentally friendly. The other trend is the use of space.
5 more minutes. You have 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. Actually, in order of severity, cities that is impacted most by COVID-19 is Cardiff, Jakarta, and Gainesville. Reduce of people visit to workplace here might be associated with the structure of the economic structure of our city. As you know, that Cardiff and Jakarta is a capital that rely much on a service sector. So more work can be done remotely. But here we can see a low reduction on people going to groceries and park. So despite lockdown and rise of online shopping, people still need to go to the groceries and park. And also we observe that there is a decreased appetite for public transport. This is very concerning. The next part is city adaptation. We try to offer solution in form of strategies and action. Working from home is a trend that we believe will continue, and strategies to manage this is we think that city need to facilitate zoning of internal space, recreational facilities in the neighborhood, space for neighbor and family. City also have to facilitate better waste management and introduction of energy gradient charge. Action that could be taken, for example, we could relieve density with variety in land use and architecture. Maybe it's time to for us to promote low to medium rise. We could employ smart homes like digital smart city, and also green energy such as rooftop photovoltaic. We could also incorporate nature into our space, such as biophilic design, pocket green space, and brownfield development. This action, this example has been implemented in Gainesville. So brownfield redevelopment act as a park, culture, as well as stormwater treatment area. Further action is regarding food provision. This is time for us to increase packaged food and packaged technologies to prolong the life of food. Maybe it's also time for us to consider growing our own food and source or acquire our food for local source. Better homemade food cooking. I mean, sometimes waste happen not only because our food is of low quality, but more because we can't process it properly. We can't cook it. And the next thing is dynamic and longer run consideration. Increased refrigerated storage capacity can obviously reduce waste. And we might consider secondary feeding strategies. A good example for this is the donation or food bank operation. Second trend that we think will continue is less use of public transport. And to handle this, we offer 3 strategies. The first one is encourage accessibility and distribute daily service within walking distance. The second one is linking facilities through greenways to create active travel and friendly city. And the second one is reducing vehicle space and transforming our street and space, our street to be a space to live. Action that we could take.
One more
there
minute.
Are a lot of,
One more
okay,
minute.
There are a lot of approach such as 15-minute city, compact city, and super block. The bottom line is every essential service should be available within walking and cycling distance. I will conclude with this latter of space prioritization. So under new arrangement, the focus of urban planning and residential place should put more focus on pedestrians and the vulnerables such as children, pregnant women, and elderly instead of cars. That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the group 3B. Now we continue to the next group, the last 2 group, which is now is group 1. Group 1, please welcome group 1.
Okay, so good evening, good morning, and good afternoon for our dear facilitators, colleagues, and guests. I'm going to present our work.
Yes, please, Adelia.
Okay. So we're from the first group, that is the Reimagining New Memory in the Post-Pandemic Urban Home, facilitated by Professor Manfredo and Professor Camas. The title of our group work is Navigating Through the Invisible Domesticity. And by navigating, we indicate there's an ongoing effort, turn by turn, in finding a new form of spatial practice after the pandemic hits. And by invisible domesticity, we borrow this title from Italo Calvino's infamous fiction, Invisible City. And just like how Calvino explored Venice by looking into his memory, we investigate the city by observing through the glass, at the windows of our home, and on the screen of our computer. And just as we delve into Venice through its abstraction on Calvino's city, we investigate the city through its reflection on domesticity. Therefore, this research aimed to find solutions that could mend our disrupted memories of domesticity caused by COVID-19 restrictions. Our work are divided into 3 segments. The first is the point of departure, the breaking chain of domesticity. This segment examines the distribution of memory and domestic space in the city and the downside of it brought to light by the pandemic. The second segment, the roadmap conceptual studies of domesticity in crisis, explore the historical and theoretical aspect of how the pandemic affects the concept of domesticity and its future relation with the city. And the third segment, On a Quest, in search for a new memory of domesticity, identifies some form of adaptation happen in society and suggests further solutions that will reshape our memory of domesticity. For the first segment, my friend Jing Jiang will explain to you.
Okay, thank you, Adelia. So this part, the point of departure, is the background of our group research. And this is a study about domesticity and memory, focusing on their contemporary mobilization exposed by the epidemic. So taking Starbucks as a case, this study concerns the fragmentation and distribution of domestic space beyond the limits of the home proper. And Chinese New Year is considered as a representative festival to explore the role of memory in constructing our sense of time and place in cities. Andrea's work on hyperreality and Deleuze assembly thinking constitute the theoretical underpinning of this study. So let's begin. The study has 4 phases, step by step, and each of them starts from the understanding of a phenomenon and to the exploration of the mechanism behind. So the first phase, copy, we're looking at a phenomenon that instances of public and private space, practices, and their symbols have been progressively transformed into a commodity. The transformation is well documented for its public components, but however, it is not limited to public space. Rather, it has extended to the domestic space. Domestic space, as well as our memories and experience of it, has been reproduced and displaced into the public realm. And when the space is transformed into a commodity, the financialized space is constructed as an assemblage composed of specific elements, relations, and narrative agents. The assemblage operates by triggering people's active memory. And domestic space, composed of domestic elements, domestic relations, and domestic narrative, is reproduced in public realm to create an emotional value and strengthen a collusion between human beings and space. So this leads to the second phase, reform. The reproduction creates new models formed by self-referential signs, which are simulacra, aimed to supplant the original formation. These simulacra succeed in reforming and redefining the idea of domesticity. The simulacra penetrate deeply in the everyday practice of people and exercise a profound transformative power. This new model established as a standard, the reproduced domestic space as an assemblage is empowered a simple meaning beyond its original domestic function. Physical elements, daily practices, and narrative associated to the domestic have been refined, polished, and perfected, and clean, perfumed, comfortable, safe experiential space and memory have been produced. So this leads to the next phase, replacement. The simulacra displays private space in quasi-private spaces that dispossesses the individuals from their own domestic space. The distribution of quasi-private commercial domestic spaces causes people's dependence on commercial providers, leading to an alienated nomadic lifestyles. So how does it work? It is because the symbolic meaning redefines the domestic elements, relations, and narrative, and regenerating people's active memory. And the financialized public space, along with people's memory, thus realizes the guidance and domination of the spatial sense and the alienation of domestic space. So this leads to the last phase, the negation and reconstruction, because during the ongoing COVID-19 lockdowns, this process of dispossession, financialization, and alienation has been dramatically exposed. The annihilation of the city has included the disappearance of part of the home and the interruption of presence has also stagnated people's memory. So what we need now is the reconstruction of our domestic space. The mechanism for reconstruction is the same as the mechanism for distribution, just like Starbucks. So that will be our background. So that's the background. The follow-up study will give us a big vision and the solution of the reconstruction.
Okay, thank you, Jing. So I'll continue with the second segment, the roadmap of conceptual studies of domesticity in crisis. This study looks at the definition of space through the utopian lens and how it has changed due to this pandemic. Many activities are restricted and move into the domestic space, which causes a shift in the definition of domestic space itself. Now, changes seems faster than ever, but are we learning as fast? Lifelong learning must be one of the mechanisms that accompany us during this social acceleration. Hyperconnectedness and accelerated communication flow facilitate our complete availability and omnipresence to a point of no return. In fact, the most important product of industrial societies is speed. But suddenly the whole world is on pause. We had to slow down to accommodate this lockdown. This was the first pandemic in the globalized world, a world that proved its fragility as the result of the globalization. Time has perhaps reminded us that we are fragile and unable to build a responsible future. But if this incapacity depends entirely on us, in terms of fragility, a shift of awareness must happen. At times like this, imagination of an utopian space becomes a ray of hope and a call for action for a better future. However, it should be reminded that utopia is an ideal that exists only in our mind. There can only be approximations of it in reality, and this is called heterotopia. Heterotopia is a place of difference in which several kinds of space, some incompatible with each other, is nested together in a single heterogeneous space. According to Foucault, this space has transformative properties to combat degrading homogenization that is so common in modernization. A kind of heterotopia space is actually quite familiar to us today, that is the virtual space. Various locations around globes in different times are mixed together in a single space, where boundaries of public and private is in constant negotiation between authority and privacy concerns. Now we are confined in isolation. Virtual space become increasingly important in the physical space. Normally, our strength would occur from being close to each other, from communicating face to face, and now communities come together more powerfully in the virtual space. We found that the house becomes a collective space with increasing heterotopia nature, where work, leisure, public, and private is cramped together in a single space, aided with the use of virtual space. Unfortunately, we also found that with the enroachment of rigid work pattern to domestic space, the heterotopic and transformative quality of the virtual space became misused and authoritarian. Thus, an important question to consider is how can we achieve synergy and appropriate boundaries in the increasingly heterotopic landscape of domestic space? This leads us to the third segment of this research, on a quest in search for a new memory of domesticity, which is basically the proposal segment of our research. This segment investigates how the domestic space can adapt during pandemic condition through collaborative spatial practice, addresses home as a private place to resist from public, but it can be a place of public encounter through the spectacles of media and technology. Based on the background and theoretical studies on the roadmap section, this part proposes a hypothetical solution in search of a new memory of domesticity. The main strategy is collaborative spatial practice that consists of 3 parts.
5 more minutes, 5 more minutes.
Okay. Firstly, the quality of domestic resistance that reflect the house as a private place to rest and relaxes and should be protected from the relentless intervention of the public. Secondly, the need for public encounter that concerns with human psychological needs to connect to the outside and socialize with other people. And thirdly, the idea of important spectacles that addresses the role of digital media and technology to bridge the private and the public activities in the home. The results of this strategy is a form of reconstruction that brings the city into the domestic space through the virtual realm. During this process, people's activity are constantly moving from private life with the black and white color to the public businesses with the colors in the pictures. The house has become a shelter for the spectacles of the city. As the boundary between inside and outside has blurred, so does the limit between programs. In our proposal, the spaces provide multiple functions in a room, both public and private. The first unit, this one right here, contains a living room as the private realm, as well as office and cinema as the public realm. And the second unit, that is right here, provides a function of a private bathroom that also works as a public spa and gym. The distance between what is private and what is public is just a button away. By separating the domestic spaces into units, bath, bed, and kitchen, we maintain the level of privacy and the idea of mobility inside domesticity. Now, as the city shrinks into the house and the importance of physical public space and megastructures building becomes questionable, with an assumption that these megastructures will be abandoned in the future, we distribute the domestic units to occupy the remaining structures. This illustration right here shows the transformation of house as the city itself, that is what we call domesticity, also a collaborative neighborhood connected to the public with digital media. While still maintaining the existence of private spaces, a home becomes the city itself where all of our activities are centered. And that's from the first group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the group one memory. You have done fascinating work. Thank you. And now, finally, we already reached the last group. So group 4, you can start your presentation material. Thank you, group 4.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you see that? Yes, thank you. Okay, so thank you, everybody. We're the Planning Mobility team for the post-pandemic city as a group of 9 students who represent 7 different countries: the US, the UK, Germany, Hungary, India, Indonesia, and China. And our intent is to find the collective way forward after the pandemic to resolve the forecasted trends that COVID has prompted. Next slide, please. These are our team members representing 4 different collaborative universities. Next slide, please. And our goal is to address and counter the private vehicle trends for work commutes caused by the pandemic, as we know these trends would be harmful to continue. Trust that has been lost in public transportation needs to be regained. So thus the overall objective for our team is to create equitable access and sustainability for work commutes after the pandemic, since much traffic will be regained over time as more people return to work in their normal lives. To do this, we created a global survey as a basis for a comparative study, which I will leave to Grace and Flora to share with you. Next slide, please.
So first of all, we distributed a survey assessing travel behaviors and perceptions of people. We asked questions at 3 different time points, these being pre, during, and post-pandemic. The post-pandemic questions related specifically to people's ideals, and these are our results. We received 310 responses in total. The vast majority of respondents is female, representing 62%. The top occupations are students, managers, architects, and professors, and respondents working in these professions represented more than half of the total respondents. This is important to note because most of these jobs can be done from home, which has implications for our recommendations. We also looked at car ownership, which was high across all regions, and it was the highest in North America. We also categorized respondents into 4 geographic locations based on their home location. We had Europe consisting of mainly urban and transit connected areas, North America consisting of mostly disconnected suburban areas, and we also split Asia into connected urban areas and disconnected rural areas. So urban Asia and rural Asia. Next slide, please. First, we asked people about how much they worked from home and how much they commuted. The vast majority of people commuted to work pre-pandemic. However, this number went down significantly during the pandemic, while 100% remote working increased to the highest category. We can also see in the post-pandemic section that people aspire to be in a 50% commute, 50% remote working situation in the post-pandemic city. We also went ahead and found some such studies, existing studies that we can compare our findings to. For example, the study by Shibayama looking at the magnitude and motivations of changes in mobility caused by COVID-19 has found similarly high levels of remote working in some European countries. Next slide, please. We also looked at travel modes across different regions, and we identified two main trends. First of all, fairly high public transport use in Europe and urban Asia, and high private vehicle use in North America and rural Asia. During the pandemic, we can see a dramatic loss of public transport use across all regions, and it almost completely disappeared in North America and rural Asia. Simultaneously, there was an increase in private vehicle use during the pandemic across all regions. It is important to note that private vehicle is still only used by roughly 50% of all respondents in EU and urban Asia. Active travel was generally low before the pandemic. However, many respondents show an interest in active traveling, particularly in North America. But this contrast between actual active travel levels and desired levels may represent a lack of infrastructure in these locations. Additionally, we can also see in the post-pandemic section that people aspire to use a combination of different travel modes. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of studies that have found similar findings. For example, the study by Abdullah looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on travel behavior and mode preferences also found that European, Asian, and North American cities show increased private vehicle use and decreased public transport use. Next slide, please. We also asked people about why they chose certain travel modes. Graph 1 is an aggregate of all travel modes across the 3 time periods, pre, during, and post-pandemic. We can see that convenience remains the #1 reason for choosing a specific travel mode, which is followed closely by time to destination. Not surprisingly, perhaps risk of infection increased during the pandemic. And another interesting thing was that a higher proportion of people expect sustainability to influence their travel decisions in the future or once the pandemic has passed. This may be purely aspirational, but it is a trend in the good direction. And then the second graph is a breakdown into different travel modes. Again, convenience is high across all travel modes. And then a couple of other things. Avoidance of congestion was an important reason for choosing public transport or active travel, and also sustainability played the largest role for active travelers. Next slide, please. And again, the same Abdullah study on the impacts of COVID-19 on travel behavior found that people have placed a high priority on infection-related factors, while other factors became less important during the pandemic. This is, you can see on the infection concern factor that goes up to 71% during the pandemic, and also the safety and security in the bottom row, which goes up from 47% to 66%. And next slide, please.
Okay, so we also asked participants what measures they wanted public transit providers to implement or improve. And we looked at these measures pre, during, and post-pandemic. So unsurprisingly, health-related measures dominated all other measures during the pandemic. And interestingly, this remained true for people's considerations post-pandemic. Health-related measures popularity across time may also reflect a general desire for sanitation and hygiene on public transit, since it was also relatively high in the pre-pandemic time point. Improved space, privacy, and safety became the second most prioritized measure during the pandemic and is expected to remain a priority. And then reliability, accessibility, and decreased wait time were important across the board. Next slide. So next we broke down the post-pandemic responses by region. So health-related measures remained the top priority across all regions except for Europe, where reliability was top. We see the same priorities consistently across regions. And then we noticed that in places where there was a lack of infrastructure, so North America and rural Asian cities, measures like integrated ticketing, so more advanced public transit measures, are less of a priority, likely reflecting a lack of overall transit infrastructure. Next slide, please. So we also asked people what they wanted in an ideal workspace, and their priorities were privacy and personal space and collaborative space. And I think this goes along well with the desire for a 50-50 split of work commuting versus working remotely. So maybe the work environment can be more collaborative and private work can be done at home. Next slide. So let's skip the summary because I think we need to move to other things. And we'll go to the next slide. So as travel increases and we come out of the pandemic and communities return to a new normal, policymakers and planners must intervene to combat this increasing reliance on public or on private vehicles. So considering these trends and ideal work scenarios that we've outlined, our recommendations will prioritize these sustainable development goals. So our recommendations will benefit all and prioritize those with the least access, which is goal 10, reduced inequalities. They'll center around making cities and communities inclusive, safe, and resilient. And they will aim to reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector, impacting climate change. Next slide. Okay, so let's get into our recommendations. So starting with future workspaces, supporting our findings that people want to work remotely, about 50%.
More minutes, 5 more minutes.
Some companies will shift to hybrid or fully remote work, and there will be a reduction of total office space, allowing for more land mix and walkability. Measures like hot desking will allow workers to reserve desk space and expand flexible collaborative space. And then health measures will be incorporated into designs. And now on to Heather.
With the anticipated hybridity of remote working, there's a huge potential for us to redistribute rush hour for commuters. And by taking advantage of the less congested roads, we can save time and money through this efficiency, and that can help car-centric locations make more sustainable choices and alternatives. Next slide, please. Getting to specifically geographic areas, these are specific recommendations for Europe and Asia where they have already existing good connections. Next slide, please. Okay, maybe we can go to the next slide and we can come back to that one. Unfortunately, our survey results for European respondents showed a dramatic loss in public transportation even after the pandemic is over, and we hope that this is due to an increase in the multimodal responses where public transportation is only part of their transportation mode, to include active travel and possibly even car sharing, since sustainability was a significant portion of their reasonings in choosing their post-pandemic transit. Thus, the recommendations shown on this slide emphasize active travel as the most sustainable and possibly even trending solution. Next slide, please.
Yeah, for Asian cities, people are more focused on waiting time for buses. So the frequency of buses has to be optimized in a specific time frame to meet the high number of commuters, especially during peak hours. On the other hand, they focus on bus accessibility. So some low floor buses or kneeling buses could be improved to create inclusiveness. In addition, people in Asian cities are more willing to use shared vehicles than in other areas. Although carpooling can ease traffic pressure and reduce pollution, it is still important to focus on the sustainability of car sharing, for example, by encouraging platforms to use new energy vehicles. The focus on the mobility infrastructure is a key, which Asian cities are driven towards mass transit infrastructure like metros and BRTs. Adapting to this situation, the pandemic scenario, to invest on infrastructure incentives and facilities to make safer multimodal and urban mobility in shaping the urban form as well. Increasing congestion pricing, which could potentially strengthen traffic management and raise funds for future investments. And the government should encourage the mobility players, the OEMs, to increase the EV manufacture to stimulate the local economy and mobility options. Yeah, next slide, please.
Perfect. So this is for the more solutions for more rural places or just disconnected places in general, like North America or rural Asia. Next slide, please. Since our research results show the primary concern to be convenience and cost, the best solutions for places like the US without existing public transit would be to find innovative incentives for car sharing and EVs, as the automobile is not going anywhere anytime soon. Ad campaigns for public transportation will have to spur enough interest and trust back in public transportation to start investments. However, if we can make carpooling or ride sharing
1 minute
convenient
more.
and
1
more
minute more.
attractively economic, we believe it will become a real possibility. Next slide, please.
The last one is, since there are so many space for development at the rural area, we could suggest to keep the sustainable development for the cities, and here are some recommendations from us, like transition to sustainable energy generators or other cleaner alternatives such as hydrogen, and then retrofit pedestrian space for universal accessibility and improved design, and then transition internal combustion vehicles and infrastructure to electric ones. We also can like sharing bikes or e-scooter rental to provide short range mobility, and then retrofitting
Hey,
public
your time is
transportation.
up. The time is up.
Yeah. And yeah, that's more or less.
What is your first last slide, perhaps? Do you have any general? Oh,
that was the last one.
Right. Very good. Thank you for the group 4 that talk about the mobility scenarios for post-pandemic city planning. So, ladies and gentlemen, all student groups have already presented their conclusion and recommendation to their researches and study in the respective topics related to the post-pandemic city planning. So, I personally think that all groups had already shown us a great and tremendous work that is only a span in less than a month. So that is very great work and much appreciated for all groups that have already working hard. And also it shows diverse academic background and nationalities, and it becomes the fruitful when it comes to the results of the research study. So it's very good. And now, at this time, I would like to invite our honorable supervisors to discuss about the group presentations. Firstly, I would like to invite supervisors from Group 1 and Group 4. Prof. Kemas from Universitas Indonesia, Prof. Christopher Silver from University of Florida, Dr. Manfredo from University of Auckland, and Dr. Andrea Frank from University of Birmingham. Yes, please, Prof. Silver.
Thank you. Excellent presentations, as Mashoub has indicated. One of the things that really strikes me in looking at them collectively is the connectivity on the notion of space, and whether it's domestic space or neighborhood space, whether it's dealing with eco-city. And what it reminded me of, and probably maybe this came into your discussion, of the the perspective that Jane Jacobs brought to planning back in the early 1960s of the importance of neighborhood. But one of the differences now is we have a new technology and we have the ability to not simply have people living in a neighborhood setting, but also to be able to carry on all of their activities, including work, in a way that eliminates the necessity for commuting on the sort of traditional basis. And I really think that you've captured some of the challenges of doing this neighborhood based, both by looking at, as the first group did, looking at restructuring the home and how home space works, and to make it, in a sense, a kind of a little domestic factory, growing food and carrying on all sorts of activities. But then also the idea of creating a sort of a broader connection with all of the urban activities within the neighborhood context. And I think the key new variable that Jane Jacobs would not have recognized is the role of technology. And that, I think, is critically important in this perspective. It also suggests, in a way, going back to the drawing board to think about how we plan, how we regulate activities that are allowed and not allowed. Certainly, I've seen in the case of Indonesian cities that they are not as enamored with the notion of zoning certain activities into a single space, but allowing multiple uses to exist in different places. Certainly in North America, that's been a problem, and we've tried to counteract it a little bit with mixed use zoning, but there's a sort of a strong tradition of separating these activities. And I think the post-COVID city is going to have to address that. So I think your presentation certainly elevated that concern to, I think, a much higher level. And I really appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Prof. Sipler. And now we come to Dr. Andrea Frank, please.
Yeah, so really good work in unusual conditions from all the groups, and congratulations on really pulling this off and collaborating. I have one image that stuck in my head when you presented about the domestic and the home and measuring the time spent in the home. And there was this one image from, I think it was group 3A, that looked at how can we reconfigure the home. And it was a very small home, and you offered an extra bathroom and reconfiguring the living room space, but nobody questioned the big garage with the car in the house. And given the sustainability pressures and questions around the car, do we have to have that in the house and take that much space? If we could do different things in the house that might be more productive, more creative, and differently. So it might be just a subconscious representation in that group. But of course, it's true in North America as well, that in some houses, a large space is taken up by a single, double, or triple garage. And so maybe we need to rethink the balance of that. And that's all I want to say. In the interest of time, I want to give Kimas and others, or Professor Manfredo and others, the opportunity to talk.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Andrea. So for the groups, they are asked by the facilitators. Later, you will have time to respond to the facilitators after hearing or listening to all facilitators. So please now Professor Manfredo, your time to talk.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Musab, and all the others for organizing this workshop that was really, really challenging, but at the same time interesting because it brought us together from different realities and different perspectives. The final presentation, of course, is always very challenging. So after 4 weeks and collaborative work of many students presenting the complexity of the topics, of the solutions, of the analysis in 15 minutes is essentially a very hard job and necessarily reduces the depth and the breadth both of the analysis. Anyways, I think that what we've seen today is a really good way of reporting, and we've also some experimental ways of using collaborative systems like Miro to preset the final results. Anyway, what I'm interested in, what I would like to just highlight is the quality of some particular groups, some particular investigations. And I think that if we go one by one, group number 2 was, in my view, particularly relevant because of the capacity of identifying some elements that are at the beginning of the investigation, which is defining the topic. And even though a broad topic like health and healthy cities is very difficult to circumscribe, I think that what is important is to stick to very clear references like the World Health Organization and understand how this relation between the physical and the mental opens up to other resultant aspects that are fundamental, like the social and the cultural well-being. And that's something that has to do with a wider understanding of well-being. And that's quite important because that opens the research into other aspects that, as we have seen, were investigated on the basis of personal experience. And I appreciate the way in which students highlighted the disruption of routines and the inversion of the use of the spaces, domestic spaces, and how that relate to issues to do with health that eventually refer in the end to a sort of a clear, I can say, advocacy for decentralization and distribution. Decentralization that has to do very much with these routines that, of course, create a major problem when lockdown is implemented in a situation like we have now. But at the same time, the question of redistribution that, of course, rethinks that spatiality, and not only the one of the city, but in particular also the ones of the home. And indeed, as was mentioned a second ago, the question of the home and the home, how it's designed, probably is not designed for these kind of things, this kind of experiences. So we have to rethink of it in a different way. So Andrea highlighted quite clearly this question. Going to the group 3A and the question of ecosystems, it's quite important. And I think that one of the things that struck me was this one particular understanding of how the approach, in some cases, has to be revised. We've seen in the images that what we have seen in terms of ecosystem services is not just the greenwash that we see in many of our projects, in which in reality we do the same business as usual, just with some decorative or accessory that has been added on whatever it is. But in reality, a complete re-understand that goes, and I like that particular focus on derelict spaces. I remember Gilles Clément or Ignacio Solar Morales when we were talking about the third landscape or the terrain vague. And that's exactly where we should restart, probably rethinking our cities and the way in which we design them. And that's important because when we look at in that direction, then probably what we've seen, and there's that conclusion, which is this idea of rethinking a cohesion, so the family-oriented space, and the question of rethinking at the way in which we address the city. So instead of rebuilding, retrofitting is not just something that has to do with improving the situation, but is very much important for the circular economy, so the lifestyle, the embedded energy. So that's quite right what we've heard. And the question of farming, and again, with this idea of the residual, the informal, is very, very challenging and interesting. And I'm curious to see, and I really look forward to seeing the final report when it will be published of this group. Very interesting. And the last one, the EcoCity B, 3B, and I cut it short here, with this idea of ending up with a series of things that go from adaptation of the city to blending nature, the question of biophilia, the question of reintegrating integral ecologies, as Deleuze was saying, with new systems. So the smart home, but also the question to do with the social transformation that is implied in this new framework in which we are embedded, that sees in the digital technology a major change that, of course, moves into the question of food and how distribution, procurement, and also, again, farming can be reorganized. Because, yes, if it's the problem of food production is a problem, as was highlighted, of space and time, technology can probably do a lot to make up for what is missing in our systems. So that's for me.
Thank you, Dr. Manfredo Manfredini, for the feedbacks to several groups. And now we move on to the last facilitators from the group, Prof. Kemas. And afterwards, I will welcome Professor Gunawan Cahyono to give his question and view, as it was already also mentioned in the chat room. Thank you.
Okay. I have to give congratulations to all of groups today. You have achieved remarkable results from the almost 1 month's collaborative works. And I know that you face difficulty during the workshops with limitations for travel, and then lockdown, etc. But I just would like to add 3 points, because the other already mentioned by Prof. Silver, Dr. Andrea, and Manfredo. First, the role of a human being and the scale that's from personal, then community, and the citizens. Yeah, that's, I think all the groups cover these things, which is from personal, that's come from personal memory, and then collective memory, and for the group, for neighborhood, its size is community, and for the eco-cities and mobility, it's also talking about community and citizenship. And then the second one, it's about flexibility, how to cope with the flexible, including flexible space, flexible mechanisms, and also with the flexible strategy, in the post-pandemic. I think all groups cover that's there is no fix things after the pandemics. Everything must be easily changed and easily fluid, easily mobile, in order to cope with the difficulty. And the third is about adaptation. I think, as mentioned before by some groups, about reconstruction, retreating. I think adaptation is a good strategy for using the existing space. That's rather than build a new building, build a new space, that's how then this the past space can fit with the post-pandemic. So there is a sense that's different strategy for adaptations applied into the groups. But overall, I think I have to give appreciation to all of groups, and thank you for giving us a good moment, a good experience to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Kemas, and for all facilitators from Group 1 and Group 4. Now we want to listen to one of the questioner from the public audience, Professor Gunawan Cahyono. Before we continue to listening to group response, and afterwards we continue to the next session of comments given by Dr. Ova and Professor Andrew Flynn. Thank you. Professor Gunawan Cahyono, the time is yours.
Hello, Chris. How are you? Andrea, Andrew, and
we're fine.
This is my first encounter with Professor Manfredini. I'm Gunawan Cahyono, a survivor of COVID-19, actually almost 1 year ago. I became the experiment of how the drug is used in my body. And I was sent home, of course. And I was domesticated. And then that let me think a lot, reflection on my life because of this sending home. And then I discovered myself, I can also discover about how heavy my wife's work at home. And also rediscovering the meaning of home is very important. So I have bias. And first, I need to congratulate all of you to have this marvelous result to me. I learned a lot today. To me, COVID-19 offer a good opportunity to rethink our past. Even we need to reconstruct capitalism. Not only the car-based planning system, also our own behavior. And I'm glad that Group 1 provide a profound presentation. And all of you did a very good research. That's what I think we all need to base on a reality about what is happening. So congratulate. But during the past, I discovered that human beings had experienced domestication more than 150,000 years ago. Then let us to evolve, not have a big jaw to digest the food. And we become civilized because of that. But civilization also creates its problem. We are now in the process of using a good term to replace slavery, let's say. So humans still exploit human, especially with the framework of market economy, growth-based economy. I discovered two very important books. One is called Donut Economy, and the last one is this, I just discovered. I think Mission Economy. It led us to rethink our behavior, the greedy. So I think about our past normal life, possibly many of our behavior was wrong, actually, harmful to many in our surrounding. So that's why I need to rediscover the term oikos, which is economy and also ecology. It's a home, it's an estate. So we cannot stay inside the home, we still have outside. But home environment with a big coat, will become our starting point for rethinking our work, even education. Why we need to use this kind of curriculum? That's make me rethink about all of these things. This is an opportunity. So the Western civilization had already go into certain level, and Eastern is still want to join that pace. But I think this make us at the same level to start thinking and thinking differently. Possibly that's it. But I'm quite surprised. Within 1 month, you can have such a result. It's a good progress. Actually, it's excellent to me. So thank you for the opportunity to share my view.
Thank you, Professor Gunawan Cahyono, to all the group presentations. And now I will provide time for the groups. I mean, anyone that can share to respond the questions from the facilitators.
We haven't heard from Andrew.
Yes, that will be in the next session after this, Dr. Manfredo, with Dr. Ova. Yeah. So the students have time to reply first. Right. From group 2, I think some facilitators mentions several groups and address some questions there.
Well, more than a question, I probably want to foreground and elaborate a bit on the work done in the group that Professor Kemas, Edita, Buraja, who is not here, and other followed. It is a project complex, yes. As noted, the research was quite articulated and not necessarily able to be expressed in this short time. But what I think is very important to highlight is the attempt in addressing a major change that we're seeing, and a major opportunity that we understand the COVID situation, the pandemic, the restriction, and everything has brought about. So, and it's the opportunity to rethink, remap, re-identify, reconsider our domestic spaces in a dimension of mobilization, in a dimension of metastability, if you want to call it like that, that not only the capacity of re-networking, of being networked through the digital technology we have, but in particular with the capacity of rearranging the relation between public and private with systems that allow us to communicate much more than just with simple text or voices. So, and that's what I think is quite important to really move on and learn from this pandemic. The problem of the pandemic is actually that we've heard a lot last year. I participated in 3 conferences on this particular topic, 2 webinars on the question of pandemic. Now I'm writing 2 articles on this topic. And always the question is, what is the post-pandemic and what we learned? And that's always a major, major question. I think that group number 1 nailed it and identified creatively the way of rethinking of it and proposing a form of utopia or heterotopia that might give us some important directions.
Thank you, Professor Manfredo. And now, if none from students are replying the facilitator responses, we can proceed to listen to our next honorable supervisors from the group 2 and group 3. So Dr. Ova and Professor Andrew Flynn. So please welcome for Dr. Ova and Professor Andrew.
Andrew, you can go along, Andrew.
Would like to start first?
Andrew?
Prof. Andrew.
Ova, you are very, very kind. Thank you. I mean, I have to say that the comments that we've had already have been enormously enlightening. And I think what the presentations and the conversations so far have done is just shown how important these issues are. And they've really stimulated further debates, probably in the ways in which we could never have anticipated to begin with. I think what it's also shown is, in a sense, the value of independent thinking here. The people have looked at this material in really critical ways. They've looked at the data they've collected themselves, and they've been very self-critical, as well as looking at the data that's been provided by others. And they've thought about this and tested it and looked at its validity for the challenges they faced. I think that then gets to another issue, which is the ambition that everybody's shown. I mean, it's unbelievable ambition here, really. And that's just shown in the ways in which people have approached these different issues, from the methodologies that have been used to the conceptual frameworks. You know, so Group 1 was just so rich with their conceptual thinking, with the use of the work of Deleuze, assemblages, the work of Foucault, you know, and fascinating, and just thinking about that relationship between memory and a particular type of space, in this case, the domestic space, and how a pandemic, it can be so disruptive for how we think about our spaces, but also about how we recall those memories. You know, when I was listening to Group 1, I was thinking, actually, so much of my memory has been, it's a sharing of ideas, and especially when it comes to space, and about how we think about space around the home. It's about sharing things with my family. And actually, the pandemic has been incredibly disruptive for how we think about space and the way in which these memories work. You know, I think it was one of the groups showed about how our use of space within the home has changed so dramatically. You know, that we had these sorts of collective spaces where we would come together from the kitchen to the living room, and now we're spending much more time in the home, but actually on our own within the home. And so that these opportunities for creating these collective memories seem to be changing. I think that's one of the things that's really fascinating about how we're using this then to think about how we've understood the past, which has been really important for everybody, how we try to interpret the present, and then how are we going to shape the future, and what sort of futures are we looking for? And again, all of the groups have been really important here in thinking about the futures that we have and how we want to shape them. I mean, there's a sense of there's a real capacity for change that all of the groups are recognizing, and that's been really important. And they've done that in different ways. You know, so you know, if we sort of think about you know, Group 1, you know, it's that thinking about, well, what are we looking for from our domestic spaces? How do we make them, you know, sort of interesting and important for people, and recognizing, you know, who's living in our homes, how are we going to be living in our homes, and about, you know, what happens within the home. I mean, there's all sorts of gender and power relations within this domestic space, and memory has an important part in both exposing those relations, but also in concealing them. And that seems to be a really important research issue for us now. I think for group 2, you know, I mean, thinking about healthy neighborhoods, which, you know, along with Dr. Ova, I have a keen interest in thinking about health, which we've been thinking about for a number of years now. It's about how that research process was started in a different way, starting from sets of personal observations to then develop a research problem and to drive the research process further forward, and about thinking about, well, what's happening at this, what they call the micro level, and how we can then get this fine-grained detail and use that to develop sets of ideas that have a real credibility to them. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about Group 2, as well as in fact all of the groups. It's thinking about this quality of data and then the confidence with which that data can then be used to make the points that are being made. You know, sort of trying to turn ideas around positive and negative implications so that we break these negative cycles and turn them into different ones. And that, I think, really interesting use, which has also come up in a number of the other presentations, about how we think about issues around scale. And it might be one of the things actually for all of the groups, just to be a bit more explicit here in how they're thinking about scale. There's been a lot of really good thinking around space and the different types of space and what's happening in different urban areas. But also scale has been used on a number of occasions. But it might be quite helpful for people just to be a little bit more explicit about what happens at these different scales and how we govern scale. Group 3, in Group 3A, well, Group 3A and 3B. I mean, there's just sort of some fascinating data here on the environment, you know, and essentially the environment matters to everybody, and we all become more aware of the environment through the pandemic. So to be able to distinguish what's happening here about different tendencies that people have, and I think it was Nathan called it the agency that people have, that opportunity to change things, whether you're tied in as a renter or you have greater agency, greater freedom to act if you own your own home. But then how people wanted to interpret these opportunities for freedom about whether they should do things or whether they should let others do things. Should I grow my own food or should I let the farmer grow food for me? Really interesting sort of rationalization there of the things that we do or we don't do, how we make use of agency there. And also the sorts of the data that we're getting around our environment, around air quality, around water quality as well. All really, really important issues. And finally, just to finish with the mobility group here, and I realise I've gone on for far too long, but I can't help it when the ideas are just so interesting, it's just really enthusiastic. And I really like the way in which they were sort of developing this typology of cities, of urban places, well, urban and rural places, so that we get away from this idea about generalizing policy solutions to actually thinking about things which are much more suitable for particular types of places, which are much more adaptable and flexible to local context. And actually in doing, in a sense, drawing upon the histories of these places to try and then shape their futures. So very impressive, very exciting, and it just really a set of observations rather than questions for people. So thank you very much for listening to those thoughts.
So thank you so much, Professor Andrew. Then from Professor Andrew, let me continue. Maybe I would like to say, first of all, well done, very well done for the excellent job, all of the group A until the group 4. And maybe just to get into the group mobility and also the group of memory. Again, from the memory group, I'm very pleased because today I can enjoy a lot about your flows. Yeah, it's really meaningful to me. And also for me, it's really a lot of informations and very, I'm very impressed for the work. And also for the group of mobility itself, when we talk about connected and then also disconnected from cities in the world. Yeah, this is very remind us to actually, I never thought that the future can become so close. We are in the future, like as if, yeah, from your discussions. And again, the challenge now is, okay, we are doing a lot of good things in this workshop, a lot of inputs and a lot of experiences. The challenge now is how to implement it into the reality. Yeah, so maybe I just would like to strongly encourage you, let's apply it into our daily life. Let's do it like less waste, less produce, like nothing that not really necessary. Don't go really far if you don't really need to. This is still again related to the mobility, because self-care is not, I mean, care on yourself is now not really in terms of egoist, but on the other side, this is like called we are care. Yeah. Thank you so much. So well done, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for Professor Andrew Flynn and Dr. Opa Chandra for giving their feedbacks. And again, I allow students to give responses to the facilitators' comments. So please, anyone interested to talk or respond or reply to the feedbacks, the time is now. Anyone from the student groups? I expect some students can give their views after. All right, so Heather say that if anyone felt too short on time to give, right?
Jing, I see you're smiling. Please give us your thoughts.
Yes, Jing, the time is yours.
Thank you. Yes, and yes, Alisa we just discussed about this just before. Yes, and I think mentioning about my experience, and it's really an honor for me to participate in this kind of research and study. And actually, for the Deleuze and assembly thinking and the Baudrillard's works on hyperreality, that's very interesting for me. And but that's still a very hard and big world to me. I still need to study more. But this research is really a good opportunity for me, I think, because it gave me a good chance to work with so many interesting friends, and it helped me to extend my vision and my thinking about these theories and to use them to more physical and practical activities. So actually, I noticed that for other groups, you have so many data, but for our groups, we look more on the theoretical discussion and the design part. I think that's just different perspective because we're looking at a phenomenon that's maybe more abstract and more control with the virtual and the actual things. So very, very appreciated to get a chance to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Jing Jiang, for the response. So Jing Jiang is the one and only student from University of Auckland. So you participant in this joint studio. Congratulations. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
As all can see, we this is a delegation from New Zealand.
Yes.
Includes a Chinese and an Italian. So sorry for that.
Yeah, excellent. True. That's so true. Right. So if no other student would like to give response, before proceeding to the next agenda, that is closing remarks by three speakers from the supervisors, I would like to invite all of you to turn on your camera video since now we are talking to about 58 participants. Well, previously it had already been reaching 60 more, yeah. But now I would like to invite all of you to open your camera video to see each other faces and selves. And now we can interact to each other. And I would like also give time for joining us in the photo session for the documentation purpose. So please, for the operator from the committee, to see these all beautiful faces that are attending since 7 p.m. in Indonesia. Right, we're still waiting for some other people who haven't turned on camera.
So I think
Yeah.
we are going to take the picture.
Yeah. All right, so everyone, please expose your face in front of your camera, and on my cue, we can count to 3. So 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, we have 2 pages in total. So once more. 1, 2, 3, smile, everyone. Thank you. Is the operator already taking the screenshot? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So now we continue to our next session, that is closing remarks. The first closing remark will be brought by Dr. Andrea Frank from University of Birmingham. So please, Andrea, the time is yours. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mushab. Well, I can just only say on behalf of University of Birmingham, a big thank you for the extraordinary engagement and work of all my colleagues from University of Florida, Cardiff University, University of Auckland, and of course the dedicated team at Universitas Indonesia, handling so much of the logistics and the graphics and the preparatory meetings at very unsociable times under very difficult circumstances. As in previous years, I'm grateful to be able to play a part in this collaboration and the International Joint Seminar and Workshop 2021 that emerged from an international grant opportunity, which I discussed with Professor Silver in 2013, would you believe? It took us 2 attempts to win it, but looking back at our achievements, and no less this year, it was worth it, certainly in my view. In my reflections today, I think I want to touch upon 3 points. First, taking sort of a tutor faculty stance, each of the 6 times we ran this event, it was a very different but equally enriching experience. The workshop took on different character each year, and we looked at different project sites. And the mega region of Jakarta, for us outsiders, really changed or changes quite rapidly year on year. This year, the event again is very different, no exception here, as we moved the workshop to commence in virtual space due to the COVID conditions. The experience for students and staff each year is intense and full and enriching. We learn new things about the city of Jakarta or other cities like this year, about planning, about our environment, but also about ourselves and our colleagues and peers operating under different conditions, learning in new situations that are thrown at us, and letting us grow with those challenges. Second, the experience this time has illustrated, to me at least, what is possible to achieve in virtual space and through virtual collaboration. It created, from my point of view, a very, professional, consultancy-like focused experience from all involved. It, on the other hand, brought home to me that in order to truly understand space, we also need to experience it. I strongly doubt that even with the holodeck from a Starship Enterprise, we could make up for the experience of hospitality of the Indonesian people, or the assault on our senses when visiting places like Jakarta or elsewhere, the noise of motorcycles or the rich flavors of a country's food. We can read a lot, but I think we need to be in a place. The true scale of the megacity of Jakarta, for example, only became reality to me on my first visit, when the taxi ride from the airport to the hotel took an hour and a half and more in dense traffic on motorway-like toll roads. Mass transit at capacity means we can fall asleep standing without the fear of falling over onto the ground. And visiting and working in a majority Muslim country means adjusting our working schedule respectfully to prayer times and being woken by the Imam calls before sunrise. So my third and final point is that, as in the past, we should learn from this year, and in future hopefully can incorporate in the international joint seminar and workshop iterations, integration of virtual activities as well as face-to-face working. This could create efficiencies and new potentialities, so we can invite experts into teams over greater distances and enable groups to potentially work prior to the actual visit and afterwards more together and continue working together afterwards. Thank you, and terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Ibu Andrea Frank, for the closing remarks. And now we move on to Dr. Manfredo Manfredini from University of Auckland. Thank you.
Are you sure? What's up?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want me to talk again?
Yes,
But
yeah.
I have something. I would like to invite Elita to give, to share with us some thoughts, because we haven't heard from her today. Elita, are you here?
Yeah.
Yes, Elita is welcome.
What? It should be you, though. It's in the poster. It's in the program. It's not me. Well,
Yes.
what should I say? Well, all the girls did a very, very great job on the presentations, on the research especially, and for the conclusions as well. I do hope that we can expand those ideas further into real life, into a real project, hopefully in the future. And I'm really grateful to be part of this workshop, to be part of this seminar. I'm really happy to see the enthusiasm from the participants as well. And yeah, that's basically what I felt right here, right now for the closing. It's kind of sad, but well, it's a good starting point of seeing a great ideas emerge from this collaborative discussions and works, and it's really enlightening, and it's very great to see it. So yeah, back to you, Manfredo.
My duty, I was just buying time to try to recollect some ideas. You know, it's 3:25 in the morning in New Zealand.
Yeah. Manfredo, are you wearing batik?
To get ready to answer. No, the reason why I wanted to probably give a particular remark here is related to this very strange condition that we're experiencing here. In reality, I think that the most how can I say, the thing that I missed most is visiting Indonesia, being in Jakarta. Jakarta is an incredible city. It's a city of magic. It's a city which, you know, things are happening totally unexpected, and this the sheer dimension of Jakarta. And it's well, last time I was in Jakarta, it happened to me that I lost my computer. Actually, I forgot my PC in the aircraft, and I arrived at the hotel. And when I arrived at the hotel, I went very happy to a cafe to have a coffee shop, because in my hotel there was is the Margo Hotel, very close to the university. There's a shopping mall. I went there and I go to a coffee shop, and I was about to grab my computer from my backpack, was not there. So I had to take a taxi, go back to the airport because they found it, and go back to the hotel. Well, the whole thing, so from the airport to the hotel back to the airport, from the airport to the hotel, took me almost the entire day. So which is something unimaginable in New Zealand, because at the most it takes you would be 20 minutes. You can't go any further. So it's quite remarkable that my experience in Jakarta. And as I told you, always something incredibly rich and incredibly complicated, but complicated in a positive way, in terms of depth, in terms of articulation, in terms of complexity of the physical, social, and if you want, even the cultural landscape that we have there. So, and that's something that, again, is missing. I miss it very much. Well, beside the food, that's, you probably all don't know, but Bu Raja, so one of the persons who's not, was in our workshop, but not today, cannot be with us, is an extremely good chef and cook. And she prepares incredibly beautiful fried duck. So it's a very pity that we couldn't get together and have fried duck done by Raja, maybe next time. But what is missing, except for this, this very, how can I say, experiential dimension, is something that probably we missed in general in all the situations in which we work from remote and from different places. My research on this particular phenomenon that happened during COVID started when, as was mentioned before, I was asked all of a sudden to participate in a webinar and give a sense of what was happening in New Zealand. New Zealand is a very strange country. You have to imagine that 10 days ago, we went into lockdown for 1 week because we had one case. So one people got sick in the country, and we went for 1 week in lockdown. So that's the situation of New Zealand. That's a hyper reality, right? I'm Italian. I'm talking to my mom every day, where there are around 25,000 people per day getting sick, getting infected, and they are in, you know, some sort of restrictions. But in New Zealand, lockdown for one person, they couldn't make sense of what was happening here. Anyways, life here is quite weird and normal, but this abnormality, this, as I told you before, impossible way of recontextualize it in a wider condition that different people are experiencing. A very, very close friend living in Brazil, and you all know what means living now in Brazil for this particular problem of the COVID. But when I was asked to participate in that webinar, at the very beginning, was at that time was April, I made a research, and because I work on social media, I made a research that was trying to capture what the hell is going on in a place like our city during a lockdown. We had the first lockdown in March, and I started looking at geolocated data. I was looking at Instagram as an architect because, of course, Instagram has a very important visual component, so it's very important for spatial analysis and the image of the city, understanding the image of the city through, you know, crowdsourced data. And what I found is something that was totally unexpected. So there is a condition in which some particular places that are places of consumption, and those are my beloved and hated shopping malls, are places that in some ways show that the resilience of virtual communities inhabiting these places and operating independently from the activities of the mall during that particular period. So something totally unexpected. A shopping mall, the largest in the country, the largest in New Zealand, one the one that is the most probably inaccessible from the local community, which by the way, is identified as one of the metropolitan center of the city, had a very strange behavior. So the number of interactions during the 33 days of total lockdown, stay home, the mall was completely closed except for one single supermarket in it. The number of total interaction was higher than in the 33 days before the lockdown, which is something totally unexpected from when you look at data from a geolocated service platform, which in reality traces the activity which are based on a place, well, in this case, a closed space. So that's quite an interesting story, because as we were looking before, and we were talking before, particularly regarding the group that I was involved with, Professor Kemas and the others, the problem that we are facing nowadays is this incredible situation of dislocation, translocalization, movement that allow recombination and capacity of reassembling cities through means that are transductive. So highly capable and on one hand, transgress the logic of space as based in a particular geographic location with boundaries, but at the same time to reconnect it, taking across spaces and remerging them in a completely different way that is transductive. So that's the important thing that I probably wanted to share with you. And during this workshop, we were able to elaborate, and I'm very happy with the result, even though, of course, images were very small, and particularly the final projects were not, didn't have enough time to be explained. Yeah. But what was important is that during this workshop, we were able to go beyond the analysis of the crisis or these confusing conditions and become able, and students were able to show us some very interesting rays of hope or utopia or dystopia, according to the ways in which we want to look at it, that probably were really not unexpected from my side, and allowed not only to understand better what the situation is, but particularly give, again, the capacity to us to think that COVID actually helps us to figure out and to progress in some way against some forces that probably are not the ones that we like. Yeah. So that's from me. Thank you very much to all of you, and particularly to the whole team. Yes, I join Andrew in saying that, and Andrea in saying that it was a fantastic team, and well, this organization, I really appreciated that for the flexibility, for the availability, and for the capacity to adjust. That, of course, is not always the case in a situation like this one. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Manfredo Manfredini from University of Auckland. And now coming to Andrew Flins to give his closing remarks.
Mushab, thank you very much. It's
yeah.
very kind. I'll just say a couple of things. And I ought to begin really just by saying, on behalf of Cardiff University, staff and students, I'd just like to say very big thank you to all of you at the Universitas of Indonesia for your support, and especially, I guess, to, and not a guess actually, I know, to Professor Kemas, Dr. Over, Elita, you, Mushab, who I feel as if I've now known for many years, Baskaro, Tika, Norvan, and of course to Professor Dalhar Susanto. And I also, it's important for me to be able to thank my colleagues, Andrea Frank from Birmingham and Chris Silver from Florida, because they've been incredibly helpful and influential for me in helping me to better understand Indonesia and Jakarta in particular, but also how we undertake this type of research. And finally, doing thanks, of course, well, who are the most important people, really? It's you, the students. You know, because you participated in the IJWS, and you've made it such a success. You know, you've thrown yourselves wholeheartedly into the work of the groups, and I think you deserve tremendous credit for what you've achieved within such a short time scale and in such challenging conditions. But it is worthwhile just briefly reflecting on what we're trying to do with the IJSS and whether we can carry on achieving those sorts of ambitions within the current climate. And purpose always seems to me to bring together staff and students from different disciplinary backgrounds and different countries in the belief that this is the best way to engage with the challenges that confront our cities. Our cities are engaged in really tackling really complex problems, and that they need different forms of expertise, different forms of knowledge thrown at them to try to tackle these challenges. And so how should we judge if this approach still works for IJWS? And it seems that probably there's three tests that we should look at. The first of these is do students produce high quality work? Well, the answer is very clearly yes, because we've seen the quality of the presentations today. Secondly, is the model of working resilient? Is it an approach that is sufficiently flexible to cope with the challenges that we face? And again, the answer here is yes. Students and staff have shown that while online working does raise challenges, it also has opportunities. And the ways of working of the groups that I've been able to observe have just been a model of how online engagement can produce supportive, cooperative relationships that are really nurturing and supportive of one another's ideas. And the third point is can IJSS continue to renew itself with new ideas so that it retains its relevance? And here I hope again that the answer is yes. The pandemic has provided us with new research opportunities as it's cast in a different light how we live and work in our cities. And it's challenged us to reimagine what urban life might be like post-pandemic. And the different groups have shown in their different ways how important it is to better understand the places that we live and work in, and that understanding places, both their similarities and their differences, really matters. And the data that's been collected has helped to reveal how special our communities can be and how much our environments matter to us. And so I think the approach within IJSS provides us with both a basis for both academic work and public policy decision making. And of course, and this is an important point, IJSS has been able to renew itself with the involvement of new partners, Dr. Manfredi from the University of Auckland, student, and Andrea Frank and her students from the University of Birmingham. That renewal brings new ideas, new opportunities for us. And so I hope that for the future, we can continue with the IJSS, that its ideas remain relevant, and most of all, that it continues to be a rewarding learning experience for students and for staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Flynn from Cardiff University. And before approaching to the near end of the closing event, closed by Mr. Dalhar Susanto, we would also love to hear the closing remarks from students from university. So I think we have two student representatives here. The first one is Nadira, and second one is Nathan. Yeah, so now the time is for you to express your closing remarks. Since the student was talking only Jingjiang, yeah, outside the group presentations. So now, please welcome Nadira.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all of the facilitators for the very insightful input, especially Mr. Andrew and also Kak Novan if he's here with us. Thank you so much for the guidance and the appreciations these past few weeks. And also thank you so much for all of the participants for all of the very beneficial knowledge. And last but not least, I to my group mates. I really had so much fun working with you guys, despite the obvious challenges of fitting our between our different time zones, and also sometimes we have different perspectives, but we managed to work it out. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadira. And now it's Nathan.
Yes, thank you, Musha. This has been an incredibly enriching experience, very insightful from all facilitators and students alike. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone from University of Birmingham. We took part in the Healthy Neighbourhoods, the Mobility and Eco-City groups, and yeah, I mean it brought up its challenges in terms of the different time zones and the unique experience of sort of finding solutions as a group, finding the basis upon which to found our research. It was an incredibly organic experience, I think, and the facilitators all kind of helped nurture that. And I think in any sort of institution where you're part of, it can be, you're very in with, I mean, working within a university is incredibly important, but it's also incredibly vital to exchange ideas with other other countries, other universities, even in the same country as the University of Cardiff, and that's been really useful as well because they obviously have their own ways of doing things. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's, I think the worries, the risks of the whole pandemic situation is that we feel perhaps isolated from each other, but this has shown that it's so important and still incredibly enriching to break those barriers which can be there at this time. So it's showing that this is possible. Collaborative exchange of ideas is still incredibly possible and incredibly important during this time. And yeah, just to force us to think slightly differently, because if we don't have those exchange of ideas, then we might not be able to capitalize on this opportunity that the pandemic has afforded us, as kind of horrible as it is, and that's something that we've attested to. It's not an ideal situation, but that's what people who want to learn and want to make the best from tomorrow, from future. We know that this, we have to make the best of the situation. This is such a great embodiment of that, and it's an incredibly unique and fantastic experience, and I want to thank everyone for taking part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadira and Nathan. And now I also welcome students from University of Florida, United States. If anybody would like to give his or her impression and closing remarks.
Either Heather or Alex.
I can go. Sorry, I've changed out of my nice shirt and gotten back in my sweats. Gotten a little comfortable. I didn't have anything prepared, but I'd just like to thank. First, I'd like to thank my teammates for putting up with the scheduling between Australia and where I am in the middle of the United States. So it was a bit of a stretch time wise. But I'd like to thank my team mates as well as the other teams for their presentations. Very informative, and I think there are a lot of questions still raised by our research and trying to come up with what will be next after this pandemic. So thank you all for that. And I'd like to thank the facilitators, all the professors and helpers along the way. We've all appreciated your input. And I appreciate that we were all able to come together and come up with the results that we did. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. So we have listened to all student representatives from all universities except Cardiff University. Since Jing Jiang has expressed her impressions previously, so I now invite student from Cardiff University to share his or her
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
can speak on that.
Grace.
Thanks. I think to echo what everybody has already stated, like big thank you to everybody who organized this and allowed it to happen in the year during a pandemic. I think we all wish we could be in Jakarta for this experience, but I'm glad we got to get something out of it anyway. I think overall it was an exciting and unique opportunity to collaborate with people from different countries and universities and coming with different expertise. And it was on a very interesting and timely topic. And I think coming from the US, like I have just from personal experience, this is definitely the most international team I've ever worked on. And that was amazing. And I think taught me a lot. And I think others agree with that. I think some of the challenges people have already mentioned about time zones, and I think different universities came into this with different expectations, which made some of the collaborations a bit challenging. And I think some of us had different expectations of clarity and structure, but I think it was very open-ended. So it was exciting to see what everybody came up with, but those were definitely some of the challenges that we faced. So yeah, thank you to everybody who made this possible and to the mobility team especially.
Thank you, Grace. And now we are approaching to the end of this closing event. So the closing remark of the event will be delivered by Bapak Dalhar Susanto as the head of Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia. But before that, we will give you symbolically the certificate of participations that actually will be given to all participants, students and faculty staffs, but now will be shown symbolically by the committee. So please, committee, can you show us the slide of the certificate of appreciations? This certificate will be sent respectively to your emails. So you will get this. Thank you for Nadira, Nathan, Grace, and Alex to give and share your thoughts, as well as Jing Jiang. Right. So now we are coming to the end of the closing event. Pak Dalhar. Please, Pak
Okay,
Dalhar,
Pak
time is yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you can hear my voice?
Yes, yes, it's very clear.
Okay. Yeah, I will give a short speech because time is already in the middle of the night, or maybe even already
in the morning.
Early morning in Auckland. So Pak Manfredo, it is time to have rest, I think. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, the professors, lecturers, guests, and participants. On behalf of Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia, I would like to thank to all of you in participating in the 6th International Joint Workshop and Seminar, Planning the Most Pandemic City. It is just like before, we gathered here and started this program, and it has been an excellent month of working together ever since, I think. We have learned, shared, and collaborated with each other in 4 different topics. It's very interesting topics. First is reimagining new memory in post-pandemic urban homes. Secondly, environmentally healthy neighborhood. Third, eco-city environment. And fourth is mobility scenarios for the post-pandemic city. Even though we cannot do workshop online, but I'm here very proud and pleased that we can handle this limitation, we can handle the difficulties, and we have broken all the boundaries. So please let me once again, on behalf of department, thank to our colleagues, firstly from University of Florida, Professor Christopher Silver, from Cardiff University, Professor Andrew Flynn, from University of Birmingham, Dr. Andrea Frank, along with new partner from University of Auckland, Associate Professor Manfredini. And the last, of course, from Universitas Indonesia, Professor Kemas Ridwan. Thank you all for your continued support and commitment. And I would like also to send all my best to the committees, Ibu Ova and the team, for the organizing this program properly and successfully from the beginning until this evening. Professor, lecturers, guests, and participants, today we may conclude and finish the 6th virtual international joint workshop and seminar event. But however, this is not the end of our journey. This is not the end of our collaboration. So let us continue and broaden our knowledge to prepare ourselves toward the challenges we may face in the future. Please allow me to share this quote from Tim Carl. He said that the only way to do our best work right now is to work well together. So with that, we sincerely hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope to see you again next year in the next our joint workshop. Thank you and good night for all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Musab.
Terima kasih. Thank you, Bapak Dalhar Susanto, for giving your closing remarks. And lastly, on the behalf of the committee, I would like also to extend my gratitude for all your full participations in this event. So we all have tried our best in providing in doing this series of IJWS webinars since last February. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, so that wraps up our agenda today. Before we close formally to the event, I would like to invite the committee to show promotional advertisement from the master program of urban planning in Department of Civil Engineering. This is a master program of the Perencanaan Wilayah dan Kota, Urban and City Planning. So this is a new program in Universitas Indonesia, and it is strongly related to the topics that we already discussed today. So to close this event altogether, we also invite the committee to show us the story, the story video of International Joint Workshop and Seminar history that has been held since 2015. So please, the committee, can you provide us the video to end this event? This is the end of our event, Virtual International Joint Workshop and Seminar 2021. I would like to say thank you all for making time to join us here. Wish you all a pleasant and healthy day, and see you on the next opportunity. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Everyone can turn on the mic to say
Good night,
goodbye.
good afternoon.